Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingsheim. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're going to revisit one of our early episodes, episode 30, with an interview with Gary Oliver. Gary is the CEO of Excelerate, and he is an entrepreneur. He has been an executive in high-tech companies throughout his career. He has some great thoughts he's going to share around leadership, and we're going to also talk about AI and its impact on business, and looking forward to today's conversation with Gary. Happy to have with us Gary Oliver, and Gary, it's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be with you.
Great. Well, I guess first off, can you give us just a little bit of your background, a little bit of your career story?
Sure. I took maybe a little different path than a lot of today's entrepreneurs. I actually started with a very large company, IBM. I worked for IBM as an intern when I was at UCLA as an undergraduate, and then went on to work for them for the next 11 years in various sales, marketing, product kinds of roles. Last job I had there, I ran about $2 billion of their software business in the data management space. Then went on to, took a very different role, went on to Visa, the credit card company, Visa International, where I was responsible for the internal technology environment for the company. So that was a lot of fun because instead of selling and building products, I was actually on the other side of the desk, actually buying, looking for innovation, looking for products to make the company more successful, more innovative. And that was really fun. Not only did we have a chance to leverage new technologies to make Visa more productive, we also had a chance to invest in companies we thought had really interesting innovations that could change the world. And so we made some really neat investments along with helping the company be very successful. After that, I went on to my first kind of mid-sized company, a public software company called Remedy. And we grew that company to about $300 million and sold it off to another competitor of ours, larger company. And then I did my first startup. Got recruited by some venture capitalists to join a team that was about 5 or 6 engineers with some big ideas, but no customers and no shipping product. And that was a lot of fun. So I did that for a number of years, grew that company up, got it profitable and scaling quite dramatically, and that was really enjoyable. That was kind of what we did. Without going into too much detail, we leveraged the data that came out of all the IT tools in large enterprises. The thesis was that while these companies had a bunch of tools that had information, the reporting out of those each individual tools was inaccurate and incomplete if you looked at it as a sum, total. And so what we did is we would automatically stitch all the data together to give a company the most accurate and complete view of their IT infrastructure. And from there, we could drive a set of analytics. We could push the data into other systems that required it. After that, I went into the AI platform space with a startup. We built a system, a platform that would automatically do a lot of the work of a data scientist. So automate about 80% of the work of a data scientist, from ingesting data to determining the correct models or AI architectures, and then all the way up to deploying that out to the infrastructure. And that was a lot of fun because it was just at the beginning. AI has been around for a long time, but as you know, it's only been recently where it's been really kind of practical, where you had the capacity, the processing power. In the old days, to have that kind of processing power, you had to be a national laboratory, or you had to be IBM or a major corporate entity. And today, as you know, with the cloud, anybody can spin up massive amounts of processing power. So the combination of some of the new algorithms, the ability to move data, and the ability to process the data in a very economical way really makes AI feasible for any company, large or small. Since then, I've been an executive chairman of a couple of other companies that are in the applied AI space. It's kind of a brave new world, and it's a lot of fun to see how AI can be applied to every business process inside of an organization.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for kind of sharing that overview. It's amazing. We've I'm sure you have this conversation. What we have in our pockets now is a supercomputer, a number of years ago, and it's changed so drastically. And tell me a little bit about artificial intelligence, AI, as far as kind of some of the trends that you're seeing, and you're out in the Bay Area, and I'm sure that it's changing rapidly.
It really is. It's amazing how fast some of these technologies are changing. It wasn't more than probably 2 years ago where you could go into any board of directors meeting or meeting with a CEO who says, look, I'm hearing about this stuff. I don't really know what to do with it. I'm not sure how it can impact my business. But I'm afraid that my competitors, if they get it, are going to run me over. And so, really at that point, it was almost as much around educating the executive teams, around what's possible. Obviously, we've been going through a period of a lot of hype with AI. And so a lot of the early projects didn't live up to the hype that had been proposed. But now you fast forward 2 years, I mean, literally every single piece, every single organization, every single business process has the potential to be impacted by AI. And so you go from 2 years ago, companies just trying to understand, how it can be applied to their business, to now every company's got, either significant pilots or significant projects going on. And it's really just around making better predictions. Part of it is the notion of automating a lot of key tasks in companies that can be automated, with machine learning or deep learning or other techniques. But a lot of times it's just around getting better predictions. So it's, knowing your customers better. So when you look at these massive amounts of data for online systems, how can I better predict, the next best action to take with my customer? What good or service might they be interested in? Are they using the things that I'm selling them today? What are their preferences? How can I predict things that might happen? We were talking before we got online here about, the fires in California. Well, if you're PG&E, which is the main power company here in Northern California, when you have a large wind event like we just had this week where they shut power off, now you've got to go back before you turn the power on. You've got to go out and inspect all the lines. You're talking about massive amounts of power lines to understand, where there's a tree that may have impacted a power line where it could spark a fire. Well, now what they're doing is they're using drones with video footage, and they're taking that video footage and running it through artificial intelligence to identify maybe where you have a tree that's too close to a line or sitting on a line, or maybe you have a heat signature that's coming out of a transformer that's hotter than you would like. So again, every element of every business is being impacted by this stuff. Some of the projects that I was involved in the last couple of years, one was with a very large telecommunications company in India, and they went from no customers to 300 million customers in 9 months.
Wow.
Cell service. And this is about putting towers and capabilities all throughout India out to the remote, villages and things in India. So you can imagine if you're in one of those remote villages, you are maybe very poor, you don't have access to a telephone. And now, as you said, you've got this computing device in your hand that's got high-speed network. And now I can produce a good or service and get it to market. I can get healthcare, sign up for healthcare and ask questions. The company's now offering micropayments and loans via that device, entertainment, everything that you can imagine. So you take that and you enable that capability, but now you want to understand, what are the people actually using it for? How do you predict what the next best service is to offer them? What's the performance of the infrastructure and the network at the time that they're using the goods or services? All this stuff, and it's a massive amount of data, can be run through AI to start getting better predictions to serve your customers more effectively. Another good example was a bank who was having, they have these skimming devices where someone comes into an ATM and inserts a device in the card reader that allows them to take all the information, the card information off when people come in to slide their card in. What they wanted to do is they wanted to use video and AI to understand how to detect fraud when it was happening. And so we used some of the more advanced techniques with an AI to understand the movement between the shoulders and the arms to figure out, when they might be doing something that a high likelihood was that it was putting a skimmer in or taking one out. And how do you alert the bank to say, we think we have a potential situation here. And these are companies that have tens of thousands of ATMs all over the place. So I'll stop there, but yeah, AI is certainly becoming pervasive in every company, in every organization. And it really is enabling, some people are afraid of it taking over jobs.
Right.
But really what it's doing is it's allowing those people to focus on the more high level work, where the human brain and the creativity and the innovation that comes from human beings can be applied, versus a lot of the kind of things that are very, very, very repetitive that machine learning, artificial intelligence can take on. So we saw that in many, many customers where the ability to apply AI allowed those professionals to focus on the highest value things they could do for the company, not to replace their jobs, but to enable them to move on to other things, or to have the artificial intelligence actually help support them in their jobs.
Yeah, I think that has been a fear for some people. It's like, okay, so it's going to get rid of a lot of jobs, and are we going to have robots doing most of the work in the future? What mindset do you think a new leader is going to need to have as far as to deal with this fast changing technology?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Mark. If you look at what's happening in technology in general, you've got sort of a lot of innovation that's happening on the West Coast. You've got a lot of innovation that's happening on the East Coast. And certainly there are other pockets and corridors, great technology around universities in the Midwest and whatnot. But if you're not in those professions, as you said, I think a lot of people are sort of freaked out. How do I leverage this? What's it going to do to my job? How do I prepare myself with the skills for the future? One of the things I'm very interested in is sort of how do we enable both leaders and innovators in those areas to, one, get the tools and education they need, and secondly, how do you get them access to capital? So much of the investments that are happening in venture capital are happening on the coast, or maybe in Austin, Texas, up in Seattle, in Boston, New York, certainly in the Bay Area. You were talking about Southern California. Certainly there's, I think they call it Silicon Beach now, down in the Hermosa Beach area. But in between, now there's not nearly as much capital available. So you're starting to see a lot of these very innovative investors that are now starting to come in and trying to find those people that have great ideas. But I think, as you said, it really starts with that mindset. And the thing that's so cool about this country and about kind of the mindset of innovation, and why, if you think about all the great things in the world that have been invented in the last many years, a lot of the technologies, a lot of them came out of the US. And I really think it is that mindset to say, I'm going to take an idea that I have passion around. It's something I'm really, really passionate about, and I'm going to go make it happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that willingness to take risk, the willingness to step up to the plate. First of all, if you don't have that, then you're never going to be able to convince investors or team members or others to join you, right? So you've got to have that, just that gut feeling about, this is something I really want to do to make an impact. And then, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I mean, that's one of the things that's so great about this culture. One of my favorite sayings, you've probably heard a million times, kind of a cliche, is the 10-year-old overnight success. All of a sudden you see a company that hits the newspaper, goes public, or has some big exit event, and you go, wow, those, where did they come from? Well, reality is they're probably slogging along for 10 or 11 years, trying to find their way, and eventually they found the right combination to be very successful. And so in other cases, a lot of those leaders are people that started companies that failed, and they just got back up and did it again. And so I think for young leaders and founders, I think, have a passion about what you want to do, and go out and share that, right? Build your team on it, build investment around it, and also find mentors, especially for young leaders. Go out and find mentors that have been there before, that have done that. I think of some of the great mentors that I had were, when you're right in the heat of the battle, they'd say, hey, come on by my office, put your feet up on my desk, and let's just focus on the things you're most worried about. And it was just great to have that ability to talk openly and get their feedback, and things maybe that they had seen in their career that were similar in nature, that helped you, to instead of run into a wall at 200 miles an hour, go around the wall or over the wall. And I think that's really important for young leaders. And then I would also say, again, it's a cliche, but surround yourself with people with different and complementary skills to your own. Hire people that are better than you at certain things. I think if you do that, you're going to build a really, your odds of success are going to go up. And also you're going to build a really sustainable company. If you have a leadership team that have a set of complementary skills. Sometimes when you see companies that fail, it's the founder or the leader that tended to bring on people that had the same skills or personality that they did. And that just leads to tremendous blind spots. So in my case, I'm not a technical founder. I'm pretty good at understanding how technology can be applied to business. And I like to ask the question of, so what? Why should I care? It goes faster, it's cheaper, it's better. Why do I care? How's it going to impact my business? I've always realized that I need to team up with someone who has the technical chops, right, that can support the kinds of things that I do. And so when you build that team, your odds of success just go up that much more.
So if you think back to your first CEO position where you were put in, take us back to that. What were some of the things that you did right, and what do you wish you would have known prior to being the CEO?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had come out of, as I said, it was an acquisition. It was about a $300 million company, very successful. We had 10,000 customers, sold to a company that was larger, had been acquiring several companies. And suddenly I'm, in the offices of a venture capital firm where they let us use some of their office space. And it was the classic startup situation, right? You're getting there early in the morning and you're buying pizza late into things. And I was surrounded at that point with people that had the technical chops. These are the folks that were the founding engineers of the company, very, very smart people. The one thing I would say that a lot of founders do is you might get going in too many different directions at the same time. I would say focus is so important. So figure out what I like to call the big rocks. What are the big boulders you've got to move forward? What are those major milestones you've got to set in place and you can communicate to the team? This is a really important part of leadership. It's so easy to focus on the pebbles and the little things that happen every day. But the reality is that if you're just pushing pebbles, there's a chance you're not going to push forward the main things that have to happen, whether that's product or building the team or really understanding the product market fit or focusing on the right, gaining investors. What are those major milestones? What are the 4 or 5 major things you've got to accomplish and really focus on those? And I think inherently, most people that come out of management leadership roles understand that. But sometimes in the early stage, the startup world, there's just so much to do. And sometimes you can get focused on the minutia and not necessarily, are we really doing the things? The other thing I would say is, especially in starting companies, finding a customer and providing a solution for the customer is not necessarily building a repeatable business model. And one of the things we got into was we had a lot of really smart people. We had really interesting technology, and we got some of the largest companies in the world to engage with us. We solved their business problem. But when we got into it, probably a year later, what we realized is we were growing revenue, we were having success, but it wasn't necessarily scalable because each of those solutions was a little bit different. And I would say, looking back, really honing in on what is that repeatable solution? What problem you're solving over and over and over again that you can then start to get the flywheel effect. And so, closing a deal is fantastic. It allows you to high five the other guys. It allows you to pay payroll and whatnot. Right. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's a repeatable process that then you can go and scale up. And I think that that's something that we found in the first couple of years as we ended up getting a whole bunch of customers. They were using our technology, but they were using it in very different ways. And it didn't really allow us to hone that repeatable model. We kind of broke through that, and we got really, really good at kind of focusing on a very specific business problem. We go look for companies that had that business problem, and we knew walking in the front door, we could solve their business problem. And it gave us the kind of credibility that was needed. We had great referenceability. So, we would literally get to the point where we could go into a customer and say, give us this data, and in a week, we're going to show you this business outcome. And we could do that repeatedly over and over and over again. And it allowed us to grow several hundred customers doing that. So not sure that's a great answer to your question, but that's something that if I look back, and also I would say, keep your burn rate in control, because when you start to build the team, you start to build up the burn rate, it's harder to pull it back. And so, really focus on spending the money very wisely to the point where you have a really nicely proven model. And then, once you have a business model like that, raising money is not a problem, right? But if you don't, raising money can be a tremendous problem. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
So what would you say to somebody who is going in to pitch private equity or VCs? What lessons have you learned doing that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing, and I've gotten to know a lot of the folks in the investment community, they look at a lot of companies, right? They look at hundreds of companies every year, and they're going to place a handful of bets. So I think the most important thing is to tell your story. I mean, really be passionate about what you're trying to do, be very clear on that, and have a story that makes a lot of sense. If the story doesn't make sense to you in a very short period of time, it's not going to make sense.
Right.
So I don't care if you have a 100-page deck with all kinds of details. You've got to really hit them between the eyes with a compelling story. I think that includes your own story, your own background and story, and why you're so passionate about what you're doing. And then really have a very realistic approach to, one, how big this market can be over time, but a realistic approach to here's how we're going to go about it, right? These are the major milestones. And then also what you want from them. How do you want them to partner with you? It's is it a matter of just looking for capital, or are you really looking for someone that's got operational experience that can bring to the board, right, to help you to make sure your odds go up? I would say really getting that story packaged correctly and playing it out to your friends and and others that you respect in the industry. Have them poke holes at it, right? Have them find ways that you can tighten it up. And then also, I would say, really accept the feedback that you get, because even a no decision, you're going to learn something from every one of those meetings. So there's no such thing as a bad pitch meeting, right? Go in there, pitch it, and ask them for their honest feedback. And if they don't fund you, that's okay. You're going to get great feedback that's going to help you as you refine your story for the next set of meetings. So those are a couple of things. Certainly private equity, if you're in a larger company that's an established company, and you're looking out to raise expansion capital, maybe it's a little bit different.
Sure.
I think what they like to see is they like to see a really repeatable business model with profitability and see clear, smart growth, profitable growth. And I think obviously that comes down to product and customers and referenceability and a great track record from a financial perspective.
Great. Well, tell me a little bit. You've been in technology. Is there anything that you can't live without that's made you more productive? Gadgets, technology that you use on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think it's like everyone else, I'm sort of tied to my smartphone.
Right.
The good news, bad news with that is that, as you know, you can be mobile and you can pretty much do work wherever you are as long as there's some kind of a connection. I think one of the challenges, especially for founders and leaders in a very fast-growing, fast-paced environment, is you also got to learn how to turn off. And so while the technology enables amazing connectivity, you also have to know when it's time to flip it off.
Sure.
One of the things you find is that when you're grinding, you can get to the point where you're processing more than you're getting great output, and sometimes that's the time to shut the brain off for a little bit, right? And kind of refresh yourself, get the batteries charged up, and then you're amazed. It's amazing how fast you can make decisions after that.
Right.
I find that myself sometimes, and you get to the point where you're thinking things through and having too many loops that
right.
you might be a little fried, and time to recharge the batteries.
Sure. So how do you recharge outside of work? What are your
So
your
I'm
interests?
a fortunate guy. I've got 4 beautiful kids. They're all now grown out of school, and three of them are in technology, and one of them's in medical school, about to do his residency. So we've got a very close-knit family. I married my high school sweetheart. So for us, it's all about the outdoors. We like to get out in the outdoors. We like sports, whether it's playing golf or spending time in the mountains. And again, those are times where it's important to turn off, right? You may have your phone with you, but maybe it's turned off or in silent mode or something like that. But yeah, for me, and then I also am pretty passionate about giving back. So I'm involved, as we were talking about before, getting involved in some of these nonprofits. There's an organization that helps mentor and coach nonprofit leaders. And these tend to be organizations that are, some are in the US and a lot of them are in other parts of the world, where they're trying to, kind of improve the lives of children around the world. And it's really fun. It's kind of a flywheel effect that if you can do kind of mentoring and leadership coaching for these incredible people that are starting these organizations, then their ability to impact and scale up is tremendous. And so that's an area that I really have fun with. And part of it's taking, the 30 plus years that we've learned, by management and leadership, and helping to apply it to people that are trying to have that kind of social impact. So that's been a lot of fun and feels good as well.
Good. Any parting advice that you'd give a new leader or an up and coming leader?
I would say these are some kind of sort of cliches, but if life is short and it's a small world, and I would say that leading in really great times is easy. I think leading when the chips are down is really the test of a leader. And I think if you stay focused and you do the right thing, you understand your stakeholders, both investors, customers, employees, and really try to do the right thing while doing the right thing for the business, it's always going to come around. And it's hard. It's easier to say than to do. But if you do it, even if the company has a hiccup or fails, it's a small world. Those relationships you built, both with employees, investors, and customers, are going to come back around to serve you well. So, that's maybe something that I would pass on to other leaders.
Great. Well, thank you, Gary. Appreciate your time and your thoughts today. This has been a lot of fun, and I wish you continued success in your career.
Thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.